get my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Hello, BYWG tribe. This is Dr. Noah. We wanted to make you aware of our never-before-featured book of the month and a best of the best for the product of the month for May 2018. Keep in mind, all the links, discount codes, and special offers for the product and book will be listed in the show notes in iTunes, in our weekly newsletter, and on our website at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com at the Listen Now tab. Our book of the month is Neurosculpting, a whole brain approach to heal trauma, rewrite limiting beliefs, and find wholeness, by my friend Lisa Wimberger. Our product of the month is ButcherBox. ButcherBox is the #1 source for grass-fed and grass-finished beef, free-range organic chicken, and heritage breed pork, delivered via subscription on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. I personally use ButcherBox and highly recommend. The special offer for BYWG listeners is for any new subscriber, you'll get $10 off your first box and free bacon included in all boxes ordered for 2018. Yep, you heard that right. Free bacon for all orders and boxes ordered in 2018. You can hear Lisa Wimberger on the podcast in May 2018 and Michael Salguero, CEO of ButcherBox, in the BYWG podcast archives June 19th, 2017 on our website at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com. Hello and welcome back to Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer and I am your co-host. Today our guest is actually a return guest, Niki Gradrix. If you want to listen to our first interview with Niki, please go back into our archives dated March 31st, 2016, in addition to another interview on our Longevity and Anti-Aging Summit we hosted in the summer of 2016. So Niki, as I was mentioning, I was watching 60 Minutes about a month ago with my wife, and Oprah brought up the topic of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And as soon as I saw this, I knew I had to have you on again. So welcome back, Niki.
Thank you so much for having me and covering such an important topic again.
Yeah. So let me do your bio and then we'll get started. Niki is an award-winning nutritional therapist, bioenergetic, and psychological practitioner, helping people to optimize energy and overcome emotional stress and trauma. In 2005, she co-founded one of the largest mind-body clinics in integrative medicine in the UK with patients in 35 countries, where she worked as director of nutrition until 2010. The clinic specialized in treating chronic fatigue syndrome. The results with patients at the clinic on the nutritional protocol she designed were later published as a preliminary study in 2012 in the British Medical Journal Open. In August 2015, she hosted the largest ever free online health summit on overcoming fatigue, interviewing 29 world-leading experts on optimizing energy with over 30,000 attendees. See more at theabundantenergysummit.com. Niki has spoken on over 25 online health summits and has been the keynote speaker at live conferences internationally. Whew. All right. So Niki, we talked about 2 years ago, and I like I said, I encourage people to go back and listen to that first interview. But in this 2-year span, what's been going on in your life?
Well, I have been kind of consolidating that work. The original data, when I started to find out about adverse childhood events and how so important it is in terms of how it impacts health, the data kind of blows everybody away, and people realize that, you have a lot of early life stress, you have potentially a 20-year reduction in lifespan, and dramatic increased risk of 7 out of the top 10 causes of death. So since then, what I really did is start to dig into the mechanisms much more, and also come up with much more comprehensive support on programs for recovery that are sort of bottom-up and top-down approaches. So at the moment, me personally, I'm putting together a kind of a membership site, most likely. There'll also be courses coming out of that are addressing both overcoming fatigue, but also overcoming this trauma, because the two, they go so much hand in hand. And that's how I got to find out so much about the trauma, because I was actually working with chronic fatigue, and I found out that so many people with fatigue and so many other illnesses, somewhere the root cause of that, there's some level of trauma in childhood that impacted them physiologically and psychologically and impacted their beliefs and their behavior. And all of those things kind of go together to create, illness in adulthood and things like digestive issues and all the things that we see, but that's so common.
So for our audience, just for those who aren't privy to the ACEs information and what it means, what exactly are the adverse childhood events or experiences?
Well, originally the ACEs study it was a very big, impactful study done by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente back in the mid-1990s. And it had a big impact because they were looking at 17,500 adults. And they were looking at things like they had 10 categories in that original study. So parents separating and divorce, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, physical and emotional neglect, domestic violence, mental illness in the family, substance abuse, incarceration by a related family member. So those kinds of things. And then they found these huge correlations that, if you had 8 ACEs, you have triple the risk of lung disease and 3.5 times the risk of cancer and things like this, and heart disease. So it was profound. And if you had just 4 ACEs, you have a 400% increased risk of depression and Alzheimer's. You have a 600% increased risk of things like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. But everything was in there and connected. So those are the things we're kind of talking about. One update I would say since then, as I've been really doing the research, even the researchers themselves that did that original study have said, we didn't come up with a comprehensive list. We didn't know, we weren't expecting the results that we got. So they just chose 10 categories where there was some research. But I think there's a couple of areas that are exploding on the internet right now in terms of people. There's an unmet need, and that's particularly emotional neglect. And also, I would say emotional abuse, as in kind of narcissistic abuse, because this leads on to developmental trauma. That leads on to this increased risk of chronic complex illness, often through the stress biochemistry, the impact those things have on the biochemistry. And the issue is when we talk about trauma, most people think of veterans in a war zone, or they might think of being physically hit, or some kind of assault or rape. And obviously those things are physical, external things that we all are aware of. But what's not so well understood is that emotional abuse, as in narcissistic parents, being a child of a narcissistic parent is just as damaging emotionally, and it leads on to a lot of developmental trauma. And a lot of people with that type of trauma aren't sort of self-identifying as having an issue because they don't see themselves as traumatized. So in that big study, they just ask one line, like, were you a victim of emotional neglect or abuse? Very, very difficult to self-report that on a very large group of people. So the kind of that group are coming to the forefront. A lot of them have huge amounts of digestive issues, sleep problems, fatigue-related issues, pain-related issues. So I just want to acknowledge that group and also kind of bring them to the fore and say, just let people, continue to listen to what we're talking about and kind of see if you can self-identify and see, if you've got symptoms of developmental trauma, you might want to dig into that a little bit.
And I said this very clearly in our first interview, is that when I first heard you speak of these ACEs, it floored me. I think anybody that hears the research and what these ACEs can lead to in terms of your health down the road is astounding. And I'm assuming that's the same thing that happened to Oprah. She heard about this, and when Oprah grabs hold of something, in many ways it's usually a good thing. And I hope that she can help bring this to the forefront. Now, my question to you is going to be the same question I asked you, 2 years ago. I would assume that the first thing is to identify if you have suffered from these ACEs, and then the next question is, what do you do if you identify yourself with 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 or more of these ACEs? What are the next steps?
Yeah, so the first step is that exploration process. So you can actually just, if you put ACE score, you could go to my website. I've got a completely free, no opt-in needed, so that you just see the tab. It's nikigratrix.com, and there's ACE score, and you can just go through their standard questionnaire. I have like an extended questionnaire on there as well, including kind of trauma events that the research just missed off. I also include things like attachment trauma, very hard to self-report as well, and some definitions around emotional neglect and what to sort of look for with that as well. So definitely step one is this kind of exploration process. The second step, really, there's so much you can do. That's the good news. And there are what I would call like bottom-up approaches, and there are top-down approaches, because this is really where the body, with early life stress, and we're looking at the stress model. So, and because the mind and body really aren't disconnected, and if anything, that's the one thing that the adverse childhood events really shows, is that, stress, unprocessed emotions, even, there are studies showing that if you have repressed anger, you have increased chances of cancer and things like this. There is absolutely this fundamental connection, and there's no, it's just, the mind and body are one thing. And the good news is that means you've got bottom-up approaches and top-down, which means there's lots that you can do to recover. So I talk a lot about things that a lot of the psychologists miss because they're not trained in nutritional or functional medicine. So, one of the things that will happen if you have early life stress, the research shows that you basically have a reset in the neuroendocrine immune system. So your stress system, your stress responses, the nervous system get reset in the brain and the body from the date the trauma starts to happen. And that trauma might just be, an emotionally untrustworthy, sort of closed down parent, and that leaves the child feeling anxious and starts to have trouble kind of self-regulating, and leads on to many kind of developmental trauma symptoms. So that neuroendocrine immune system reset changes the way our immune system works. So now we might get overreactive to certain things, and we don't have a strong enough immune system to fight off bugs. The endocrine system changes. So we might have a bigger response of cortisol to stress, and we have a lowered threshold response to stresses into adulthood. So early life stress reduces our resilience to inevitable adult stresses as well. There'll be a nervous system reset, and this is very important. Trauma gets stored in the nervous system, and it manifests through our posture, the way that we hold our muscles, muscle tension. It's also being stored in the limbic system of the brain. So kind of that's all the ways that trauma gets stored and impacts us biologically, and it changes obviously our belief systems. Quite often we can have unconscious beliefs around shame, about self-loathing, sort of things that happen to us. It really affects self-worth. So we can address all of those things with physical and psychological approaches. So all of those changes also lead to gut dysbiosis and changes in the microbiota. So if you think you have trauma and you have physical symptoms, you should definitely, for example, be looking at the health of the gut. And if you've got digestive systems, you might want to go on a gut healing program. So there are now studies showing that there are probiotics that increase GABA in the brain and reduce neurological disorders. And the psychologists miss this because they don't know about the data, and they don't know about the fact you can heal the gut and actually improve your psychological state, for example. Other things, this is a new one that I would bring in. What I call circadian rhythm management is really important. It's one of the big breakthroughs that we've definitely had in chronic fatigue as well. People just need to regulate, go to bed. I just tell people, go to bed at 9:30. You could change your life going to bed at 9:30 at night. Literally, use campfire light, orange light, blue blocking glasses, get the blue light out and lower the kind of light at the wrong time. So we don't want bright light in the evening when it gets dark. Think about in evolution, we had campfire light. Keep your room completely blackened out at night. Don't have sneaky white light coming through then either. When you wake up in the morning, if you can, get bright sunshine first thing in the morning. These kind of things speak to the pineal gland. They speak then, the pineal gland controls so many hormonal systems in the body. The body's meant to be doing things at certain times. And when you've got your circadian rhythm set correctly, you'll sleep better, you feel better in your own skin, and it gives you a groundedness and a base of energy to actually do some of the other trauma work. But you'll just feel better in yourself, and you'll have better, and you'll have less anxiety and depression. I'll cover one other physical bottom-up approach that's life-changing. For people, it doesn't get covered by psychologists because they just don't know about it. A simple strategy, just a dietary strategy that manages blood sugar. There are so many people who have hypoglycemia, they have insulin resistance, they are jittery, anxious, their energy's going up during the day, it's dropping, they're getting kind of depression sort of feelings when the blood sugar drops, they're anxious when they need to eat food. And the psychologists, probably they're diagnosing bipolar and kind of generalized anxiety disorder. All it is a blood sugar imbalance that just needs a blood sugar control intervention, and that is to have a breakfast high in protein. If you can do quality protein, a protein shake, high protein meats, fish, this kind of thing. Eggs are great as well. A protein shake if you're vegetarian, and just keep good quality protein at each meal. Don't miss meals. Have protein with lunch. Have protein with dinner as well. Good source of nutrient-rich vegetables and plant-based foods with lunch and dinner as well, and cut out the processed and refined sugary, starchy, sugary drinks. That strategy can just get rid of half the anxiety and depression that psychologists are associating with trauma, and it's just a blood sugar imbalance. So that's 3 strategies right there that are what I call bottom-up strategies that people can do. And shall I do a couple of top-down?
Yeah. Well, I just have one comment with the bottom up. It's amazing how much can be resolved with the basics. Because let's face it, getting great sleep is a basic strategy. Managing your blood sugar is a basic strategy. I forget the third one now, it just escaped me. Anyway, the 3 that you mentioned are just basic strategies that affect our health in so many ways, and are really in maximizing your gut health and your microbiota. Those 3 things are just basic fundamentals for a healthy human person, regardless of the symptomatology, regardless of the problem. And it's nice to hear that these can be used strategically as treating these ACEs as well.
I know, and you'll be amazed that I deal one-to-one with clients all the time, and so many of them aren't doing the basics. They're really not doing the basics, and they're truly missing out. A lot of people are just up looking at the computer screens 12 o'clock at night. They don't realize that if you just switch all that off, get the phones out of the bedroom at night, turn all the electrical stuff off, get into bed by 9:30. Whatever you think you're going to lose by, going to bed early, you'll feel so much better the next day, and you'll start better in the day. So yeah, basic strategies, they should never be overlooked or forgotten. They are profound. They can make a huge difference. And most people, if you really sit with somebody and go through a checklist and see what they're actually doing, a lot of the time they're not doing it at all. So those 3 for the top up. Now, top-down approaches, this is also very interesting. I tend to sort of focus more on the nervous system with top-down approaches. What's very interesting with all this stress, the early life stress that gets stored in the body, that's at epidemic level, 67% of all adults have had some level of early life stress. The best measure of stress that we have right now scientifically is something called heart rate variability. And this measurement of heart rate variability, interesting, the more variable your heart rate is, the better adaptability there is and the healthier you are. And when we have high heart rate variability, we're healthy. And super interestingly, we are feeling good and we have a healthy body. And it's linked with high vagal tone. And the vagal tone is to do with the vagus nerve. This is an amazing nerve. I love this nerve. I could talk about how to stimulate the vagus nerve all day. This is one of the most important strategies that you can do for health and overcoming trauma. So the vagus nerve, it's the part of the parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system, so the unconscious nervous system that controls things like our fight-flight response, kind of digestion, our heart rate, blood pressure, things like this. And the vagus nerve is part of the rest, digest, detoxify side of that, as opposed to the sympathetic side, which is the fight-flight stress response. So essentially, what we need to do is if we have high heart rate variability, that means high vagal tone, which means a downregulated stress response. And it's unsurprisingly, low heart rate variability is linked with cancer, diabetes, heart disease, depression, PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, kind of childhood stress, childhood trauma. Everybody that has those kind of chronic illnesses all have low heart rate variability. The science will also show that if you're in a low emotional state, in a low negative emotional state, you have low vagal tone. So part of this research comes from the HeartMath Institute that have done 30 years of research. They can predict your emotional state with 75% accuracy by looking at your heart rate variability, which is, this electrical assessment of your heart rate. And there's also major studies coming through now confirming that if you do things like loving kindness meditations, which increase and you self-generate positive emotion, you will increase your vagal tone and the heart rate variability will actually go up, and that's scientifically proven. So some of the things that are happening with stimulating the vagus nerve, the doctors and major researchers have started to pick up on this, and they're doing electrical implants in people to stimulate the vagus nerve. That research is stunning. They're curing arthritis. They started with a case study, and within 8 weeks, this severe arthritis patient recovered. They were cured. The researchers came back, did another study with arthritis, dramatic decreased inflammatory markers, and a significant number of people were cured. They found the same with fibromyalgia. They found the same with depression by stimulating the vagus nerve. And now it's an FDA-approved treatment for epilepsy, depression. It's used for migraine reduction. It's been used to improve mitochondrial function in heart disease patients. It heals leaky gut. So vagus nerve stimulation heals leaky gut, because the vagus nerve is the nerve that innervates so many organs in the body. The only thing it doesn't connect to is the adrenal glands. So, but things to do that you can stimulate the vagus nerve, obviously could be anything emotional that feels good, like laughing, positive social relations. I can show you the studies and all of those. Meditation absolutely works as well. One of those powerful things you can do is deep breathing. It's the exhale which stimulates the vagus nerve. Inhaling can actually stimulate the sympathetic side, so always start with exhaling. Yoga is profoundly increasing heart rate variability and is stress reduction. Tons of studies on all of that. What else? There's so many things. Even if drinking beets, that's another bottom-up beetroot, it'll actually increase heart rate variability. Other top-down things you can do, Tai Chi, Qigong. I've mentioned breathing exercises. Kind of all the Eastern sort of interventions work fantastically as well. Anything you can do that generates a high positive state, staying away from energy vampires like other people who have. It's the biggest thing that can kill your vagus nerve and a high heart rate variability is someone else in a low heart rate variability state. So careful who you hang out with, and kind of conflictual relations. Have an argument with the spouse, and it's been shown that your inflammatory markers are raised for 3 days afterwards. So bear that in mind. So there's some examples of what people really need to do is to get into a practice of bringing in, walking in nature increases heart rate variability. So it's really heart rate variability and triggering the vagus nerve. It needs to be a way of life. It's not something like, you wouldn't ask me, how long should I eat vegetables for health for? It's like, how long should I stimulate my vagus for? Every day for the rest of your life, if you want to be healthy. So these are some of the things, and I encourage people to kind of schedule in. Massage is another thing, directly increase heart rate variability. So everything that increases its vagal tone, schedule it in, spend the time to do these things, and get a daily practice and do whatever works for you, what you enjoy doing. Because there's so many things, anything which is joyful, that instigates laughter and fun, and that's the mind-body connection in action.
we've been testing HRV in my chiropractic office for 10 years. So it's so we have loads of data showing that chiropractic care balances the autonomic nervous system and improves HRV. We've seen that. And it's also near and dear to my heart. I wear an Aura ring which tracks HRV, and I have some interest in CoreSense, another HRV testing modality. So it's real. I get it. You know, and I couldn't agree more with anything you said. And I believe that's why yoga resonates so well with me, because in my busy lifestyle, and I took a yoga class 2 hours ago, it's been very profound in my life for the last 2 years as well.
Yes, and these types of these are more like lifestyle interventions, whatever it is that works for you. It's too easy to not forget to do that and to not schedule it in. And over time, it's like we're borrowing. If we're doing that, we're sort of borrowing energy, and at some point you'll have to repay that debt, and it will usually come to us in some form of, our sleep will go out, or digestion will sort of start to get out of whack. And the good news is, for people who have trauma, just all of that I've mentioned already, is that a lot of that is kind of mid-level work, sorting out the vagus nerve, the bottom-up approaches. So you're already like 2/3 of the way there. The other third is where you can, directly look at, your own belief systems and tuning into your emotional state. Some of the most important things you can do if there's been a lot of trauma is to be grounded into your body every day, and to be connected to your body. Because trauma, we tend to disassociate. When we have painful emotions that we haven't looked at, we tend to find ways to, either through addictions, we'll go and do things, and it doesn't have to be hardcore drugs, it's addictions with workaholism. We may be addicted to other people and giving and focusing on helping other people all the time because we don't want to feel our own feelings. So a lot of that is a lot of sort of exploration work, again, to identify, come back into the body, start to feel our feelings again. One of the most amazing things to do is, therapeutically shown, is to journal about experiences. So if maybe you've either journal, definitely speaking to somebody, a qualified psychotherapist, is also great. But journaling is therapeutically shown that it will, people who've journaled about traumatic experiences, just written about what happened, written about how they felt, the impact that it had on them, actually their immune system markers and inflammation reduced after spending 4 days writing about, and just clearing through and releasing it through writing to yourself. Because sometimes we edit ourselves when we speak to other people, especially if it's just another person who might be judgmental, or we might perceive them to be that way. So when you're just journaling on your own, you're just working, you have no editor, and you have to make sure you're not editing yourself, and you just say what you want to say, write what you want to write. If you don't want to do that, you don't want to do it alone, speaking to a non-judgmental, compassionate sort of professional, if you've never spoken about certain things before, that's the first step as well. So trauma experts talk a lot about yoga. By the way, there's yoga therapy. That's different from just a yoga class. Yoga therapy, it's not about the poses or flexibility. It's about conscious awareness of how you hold your body, where the tension is. If you have a slump posture, it's a sign of kind of the hopelessness or the helplessness that we might have learned helplessness from childhood. So, other people have got a maybe very good posture, but then they can never relax, and there's sort of a lack of vulnerability there. So it's know thyself. A lot of it, you can do that through the body as well. And then there are other types of therapies as well, like cognitive behavioral therapy can be useful, and that's very much around correcting thinking. So, often with trauma, it leads us to feel like that we don't deserve things, that things were our fault, that we're no good, kind of negative self-belief. So there can be some thought correction around that. And cognitive behavioral therapy and seeing a CBT practitioner can help turn those negatives into much more resourceful, positive thinking. And that's important. That is part of recovery as well. So you want to address how you feel. So when you're in that low state, do things that lift the feeling. When you find yourself thinking negative things, you want to also be addressing those, turning those around as well. And I'd probably say a few final things. Just, there are some really good energetic based therapies around as well. EFT, the emotional freedom technique, plenty of science and evidence around that. So emotional freedom technique, yes, that is used by many experts, as is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's EMDR. They're both a lot of good science behind both of those, and they do actually work energetically. And they do tend to work better on discrete incidents where you have specific memories, and what in the process other memories might come up. But if you've got more ambient or what I'd call relational trauma, so it's not one thing, and I have to say most trauma isn't just one thing. It's relational, what we call developmental trauma. It's a parent who was continuously verbally abusive or closed down or unloving or emotionally abusive, for example. It's never one thing. It's gone on for many years, for example. So we call that ambient trauma. What's coming through that seems to be pretty good with that, and perhaps this is the last one I'll mention, neurofeedback. Even though the data and the research is still in early stages, there are studies coming through that are positive. It's got some very big fans behind it. So, for example, Bessel van der Kolk, who's the world leading expert on trauma, professor of psychiatry at Boston Medical School, he's trying to raise funding to get tons of research done on neurofeedback. Neurofeedback's where we connect our brains to a computer. You put the electrical connections on the brain, and it's connected to a computer screen, and you're looking at your brainwave patterns on a computer screen, which may be fed back to you as sounds and pictures. And then almost like a game, you play the game of calming the brainwaves down into a calm-centered state. And there are different kind of software that you can use. Some of it will be like visual, and you have to make things happen, like even a Pac-Man game, and you'll be more successful at the Pac-Man game when you sort of calm the brain down. So the pros are this is very good for developmental trauma. It seems to be having amazing impacts on very severe cases, so that's hope for the rest of us. But the cons are about that at the moment. It's quite expensive. You need to go and find a practitioner. It's maybe $150 to $200 a shot. You might need 10 to 20, probably 20 sessions. So, and we're still tricky finding good practitioners to do that right now. So it's still in the early days, but there seems to be a lot of interest in that as well.
Fascinating. I could listen to you speak all day. So what are you you mentioned in the beginning, what are you working on personally for our audience to help them through some of this stuff?
Okay. Yes. So I've got two big projects coming up. I'm actually about to launch my own podcast after taking a little hiatus for a while. After I did the Abundant Energy Summit, I took a break. I was interviewing many world leading experts. I'm super excited to get back into doing regular interviews because there's so many amazing people, and I want to bring all the mind body people and the physical people, so I want to get Bessel van der Kolk on board, and I'm going to be interviewing people like that, and people like Dr. Gabor Mate and other extraordinary doctors who've really gone into really get the stress and the mind-body link there. So it's going to cover both. The podcast will cover this interaction, especially anybody who's a kind of expert in psychoneuroimmunology who can talk to both aspects. For abundant energy, so my focus is energy, but that covers everything: autoimmunity, people with all kinds of different chronic complex illnesses, but it includes the trauma group as well, and people who've had narcissism, narcissistic abuse, kind of all of that group. It's sort of going to be providing lots of amazing free information through the podcast. So that's one side. And the other side is I will be launching a membership site soon as well this year. And the membership site, that will be more like, okay, tell me how to practically do this. Like, okay, you've told me that, drinking beetroot juice, like how many a day? Like, is it too sugary? What do I take it with? The actual nitty gritty of how to actually get this activated in practice so that you actually transform your life, health, well-being, and your emotional state. And I've just found over the years, people need that. People need the simple steps, the how-tos. We talk a lot about what to do, and sometimes people are kind of left with, okay, you said a lot there, but how do I practically do that? So that's what the membership site's for. And there's going to be modules covering mind and body aspects. I'll be doing free Q&A in that membership site sort of monthly and so on. And there's a support group in there and tons of my interviews that I've done already in there as well. So yes, big things coming this year.
So if they want to keep abreast of that, they just go to your website and that'll kind of keep them updated on everything?
That's right. And I've got a free ebook on that they can download, and that's also how they stay in touch with me. And the free ebook is the 7 Steps to Healing Emotional Trauma in Childhood. That's right on the homepage. And as soon as they sign up for that, they're on my newsletter, and they can stay in touch that way.
What's your website again?
It's nikigratrix.com. That's NIKIGRATRIX.com.
Beautiful. So I have one last question for you, and it's kind of a fun question that I've been asking for like the last 30 or 40 podcast interviews. What is the day in the life of Niki look like from waking to going to bed?
Okay, that's really intriguing, because I've been thinking about sharing that on like my Facebook page to show people I really do walk my talk. So I get up and I literally have a 10,000 lux light that is bright light. If I can't get sunshine, I would have this light that's literally on my bedside table, and I switch that on. So I'm getting bright sunlight very first thing in the morning. I'm sort of still on the, just kind of waking up. The first thing I do when I step out of bed is I have a red light lamp that I switch on, and I roll my yoga mat out and I sit on a cushion. I am doing sort of neck releasing. I do a few neck releasing exercises. I like to set the vagus nerve up and the tone for the day. So many people get out of bed traumatized, and they're anxious first thing in the morning. It's like the worst thing you can do. So I love my morning routine. It's my most important part of the day. So I start with doing like deep yogic exhales. I have like a morning routine, just simple, about 6 neck and shoulder release exercises that I do, yoga exercises with the red lamp, which is very healing. Red light's very healing. It's very de-stimulating. So it's a really nice start to the day. Then, quite frankly, I go and take all my supplements. Then I usually make a protein shake. Then I will often go for a run, and then I'll go for the sauna as well. And then I'll go for a quick 10-minute swim, and then I'll come and do things like come here and do a podcast. But I'm very lucky because I live right on the seafront, so I just go for a run on the seafront. So I try and start every single day in that way. Then I will be writing neuroscience modules for friends, doing podcasts. I'll do one-to-one consultations, try and eat lunch at a good time. Always go for a walk on the beach about 5 or 6 o'clock if I can, just to release the day. And then I come back home and I'm doing my campfire light. So I've got my orange bulbs going, and getting beautiful kind of de-stimulating orange and red light in the apartment so that you're starting to calm down for sleep. And then I'm usually like lights off at 9:30. So assuming that I'm not out and about, seeing friends socially and so on. So that is honestly my day. I'm not lying. It's actually what I do every day, and I absolutely love it and feel amazing. So
sounds great. I love asking that question. So, do you have any last words for our audience?
Just that, people should know that there's a gigantic innate healing capacity in the body. It looks like the placebo effect, which is effective in 30% of all cases of healing from just, sugar drugs. It triggers the innate healing response, and that's really the vagus nerve. So your body knows how to heal itself if it's just given the right environment and the right stimulation. And that's even what those arthritis researchers said. We don't need these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs anymore. If you just tell the nervous system what to do, it will do the healing for you. So yeah, the body is amazing.
Amen. Thank you so very much. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer, your co-host, and you're listening to the Beyond Your Wildest Dreams podcast. If you like what you've heard today, please share this with your friends and family and encourage them to subscribe on iTunes. Better yet, this really helps. If you can go to iTunes, give us a 5-star rating. It helps more people see us online. You can sign up for our incredible weekly email at www.beyondyourwildestdreams.com. Thank you, and as my oldest son Hayden says, be awesome and never unawesome.
1, 2, 3, 4, get my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.